because today
And we
is
are live.
awesome. I have my
Oh, that
Batgirl
means
mug.
polka dot.
Yeah, I thought, I have a ton of geek themed mugs because I collect mugs because why not? And I thought, for these, I should break out my mugs. I should make sure I have a mug. So this is Batgirl from DC Bombshells series, the limited run
Okay.
of the DC Bombshells. So I have a mug for Batgirl, and then I actually have a mini figurine of Batwoman from that run.
The my glassware.
Nice. That's
You never see
awesome.
it during the podcast because I'm in front of it.
Oh, and you got them displayed. That's awesome. I actually use my Wonder Woman pint glasses.
The only reason they're on display is because I don't have enough room in my cupboard for all the dishes I have.
We have had similar issues with glasses in particular. But since we've all been in the house together, actually, we have broken several plates, so we need new plates and bowls.
Really, at this point, if you saw how many dishes I have, you would think that I live with like 5 other people.
It's good to have extra.
It's a little you can tell how little I do the dishes in my house based on how many dishes I have. Let's just be honest about it.
That's why you have extras. Okay, I get it.
Yesterday was laundry day for like the first time in 3 weeks, but
Oh
I
my
run the
God.
dishwasher like every 2 days. Well, no,
Yeah.
I should run it every 2 days. Let's say that.
I need to do laundry today in a desperate way. I don't know. I'm running out of t-shirts, and that's the only reason I'm like, well, I should do some laundry because I wear the same rotating pair of sweats and yoga pants every day. Let's be honest.
I got all excited, so I started wearing shorts, and I threw all my sweatpants in the laundry, and then of course the temperature dropped 20 degrees, and
Yeah.
I was like, no, I have to do laundry, but it's not full, but I need sweatpants. Yeah, it's a rough time we live in.
Yeah, seriously. It's almost time to get the summer clothes out of storage. I'm working on the Heroes of High Tide book 2. I'm feeling it's going good. It's funny, like this is the 5th book, and I'm still working on my process in terms of outlining and stuff. I tried to write without an outline, just like a general idea, and it never went well for me. But I'm also not the kind of person that can outline very detailed outlines right up front. I kind of start with this. This is what I'm discovering anyway. I'm starting with a very loose outline of beats, very similar to Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And I'm getting into the story like that. And as I get into the story with those beats, then I can fill in with greater detail a more scene by scene outline where it's like this scene is for this and this scene is for that. So I've done the scene by scene outline. I've done the first draft with just the beats. And so I filled it all in with the scene by scene outline, and I'm almost to the midpoint now. This would be draft 2 is what I'm calling it. So I'm almost to the midpoint with draft 2, but it is funny. You hear draft 2 and you think, oh, it's rewrites. No, actually it's not. It's mostly all new stuff because the quote unquote first draft or discovery draft is so bare bones that there's next to nothing that I end up reusing. It's like a long form outline. I don't even know how to describe it.
My the last book was draft 2, but it was the first draft because the hey Franklin.
Hi. Hello. Franklin.
Wait, does someone have a haircut?
Oh my.
I did.
Oh, getting all fancy over there.
I was sick of just like washing it and trying to make it do stuff.
we were talking about the sweatpants rotation earlier. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like everyone
I-
looks dressed up from like the top down to like here, and then it's like, oh, I'm wearing slippers, so I got
So when I do my college announcements, originally I have a suit jacket that I was wearing and, looking all professorly. And then it just, you know what? I'm wearing clothes. Like, what more can you ask?
Yep.
I used to, before all of this, I would make the effort to get dressed, put on makeup, like actually wear jeans or some kind of like nice leggings and give myself like one sweatpants day a week. Otherwise I would be living in my pajamas, and I didn't want to be like that. But then since the stay-at-home orders, I'm just like, I don't really feel like jeans and I'm not wearing makeup and I'm due for a haircut. So really, what's the point?
So when I normally go to work, my work clothes are kilts, which I'm not just wearing a kilt around the house for no reason.
Just for fun.
I originally started doing it because one of my coworkers made not a derogatory comment, but kind of a snide comment about how I was being unprofessional because I would wear jeans to work, and I was like, challenge accepted. And so later on, he was like, he made a comment. He's like, I don't know how you think you can get respect like that. And I looked at him and said, if your pants are what's giving you respect, then you're a pretty crappy teacher.
Yeah.
And we have never talked again since.
Oh jeez.
My favorite teachers straight up look like hippies in school, like long hair, beads. I mean, one guy would constantly come to school in faded jeans that had holes in them. And he was one of my favorite teachers. Like, I did not care.
I weirdly think that the dress code concept, one, is mildly elitist and so not appropriate for this day and age. But I also think it's because the teachers who are not cool, it levels the playing field.
In a way, but honestly, as a teenager, couldn't you just sniff out the ones that were uptight? Yeah. I mean, I could.
So when the 8th graders come through, like they do a 5-minute presentation with 10 teachers, and I'm just like, hey, I teach this. And everyone's like, well, why don't you say anything more? And I was like, because they're all going to ask for the teacher who wears a kilt.
That's true.
And so I talk to guidance, and I get more requests as the dude in the skirt than anything else. And you know what? My classes are jam-packed. There's a waiting list every year. So
good for you.
One of my coworkers, he runs the video program, and he's like, yeah, you're going to learn how to use a camera and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh God, they're 8th graders. You're boring them. Guess who worked on Doctor Strange? And all of a sudden every kid's like, I know that movie.
Yeah.
And so apparently he has opening credit for Doctor Strange and Hill House.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And
how do you open with that?
Yeah, I was like, kids don't care about camera. They want to know that you worked on Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be your lead-in.
I know.
Apparently, he did say that it was one of the worst films he had ever worked on, though, like production-wise.
Oh,
but
wow.
I haven't had a chance since to ask follow-up questions. So, Franklin, what are you working on?
Today, I'm hoping to work on more of my superhero sequel. I got my poor main character stuck somewhere. It's like, okay, how am I gotta get him out, hopefully.
Do you write with a plot, or do you just wing it?
I do kind of like half and half. Like I'll I try plotting like the entire book, but I always get like bored partway through and then I change it all. So I do like, I think I do like 5 chapters ahead, and then I can like get to that point, and then I'll know roughly like, oh, here's where I feel like I'm gonna go.
All
But
right.
I know
I
the
can work with
endings
that.
are broad.
I was saying earlier, my the last book I wrote, I had like a super detailed outline. Like I knew every chapter, it was ready to go. And about halfway through it, I was like, my character is constantly visiting people, talking, and then not doing anything. And it almost just seemed like it kind of reminded me of like like one of those old RPGs where you just run into people's houses, talk to them to
Oh
grab
yeah,
something, and run back out.
yeah.
Um,
It's really fun to live in Midgar.
yeah, except I never went and fought a big bad, or there was no like overarching plot. It was horrible. So that was a 40,000 word exploratory.
Oh man.
I've had those, honestly. And I'm at the point in my draft now, and this happens every time, and I have to remind myself of that, otherwise I will panic and do something stupid. I'm at the point now, it always happens around writing the midpoint, where I'm like, this is boring and it's slow and half of this is crap and doesn't matter. And I'm like, nope, just keep going. Just keep going. This is what revisions are for. This is what your developmental editor is for. Just keep going. It'll all work out.
Do you find that mid slump that you have to go back and really rework it, or is it just you're bored with it at that point?
It's funny, my major plot points, like my first plot point, my midpoint, and my climax, I usually don't have to do a lot of retooling. It's everything between those bits that needs to be tightened, or like there'll be scenes where I'm like, I could actually combine these. Like they don't have to be separate. There's no reason for that. But my midpoints, even though I completely panic about them, they're usually pretty good. It's the stuff around it that I have trouble. Like I always know my beginning, middle, and end, always, but it's getting there that's always like the challenge for me.
I normally know the beginning, the middle ramp up, and the end, but never, like that false climax where the curve kind of goes up, back down, and then up again.
Yeah.
I rarely have that false climax piece. I'm always like, I can't just have them run in, face the big bad, then run away with their tail between their legs. Like,
yeah,
it's predictable.
Yeah. So. No, it's everything in between. And having read Save the Cat Writes a Novel, I was like, oh, this kind of explains the in-between stuff, so it gives me kind of a guide. But I am not one of those authors that's like detailed outline right out of the gate and like follow this rule and follow. I tried, but I find it really it stops me up where I just can't write. So I have it in there, I have it in my head, and I usually hit all the points, so I don't really worry about it at this point.
At some point I want to try, I saw a young adult novel outline where it says that every young adult novel can be retooled into like 27 chapters. And every chapter should follow the same formula. And they're not saying that it should. They're saying that if you take any of these popular young adult novels, it will inevitably do that, even if the author split it up differently or took a slightly different approach. And some of them are like, chapter 3, the main character must have an emotional doubt. And chapter 4, there must be a rush to conclusion, a rush to false conclusion. And it keeps it super broad, but I kind of want to try writing a novel using that exact process. And,
that would be fascinating.
Maybe it'll solve all my problems.
It might. I do love how it's almost like we're expected to know how to do it. Like, oh, you're an author, you should know how. Well, yeah, but every author does it differently. Literally. Every author does it differently.
Yeah.
I don't think I've written the same book with the same process. And I write with a typically a super condensed timeline. So all my books take place in like 3 to 4 days. It's one of the things
that's
that
nice.
I loved about Dan Brown. There's no room for extra words. And so even despite doing that, like my book 1 was a complete story. My book 2 was an emotional cliffhanger. My book 3 was just a straight out, like, you need to buy the 4th book. Sorry. And then the 4th book was like 1/3 like twisted climax. So I don't have a working process yet.
That is the one thing I'm a little worried about with this book I'm working on right now. It's the second in the series, and I'm kind of making it like Empire Strikes Back, which is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars movies ever, because it ends with the heroes not winning. So that's what I'm sorry, anybody, for spoilers. That's basically what I'm doing with the second book, and I'm a little worried that people are going to be pissed and say, "Oh, it's a cliffhanger," which I'm beginning to hate people when they say things are cliffhangers, because half the time they're not. But I'm just going to do it anyway because it makes sense for the story, and that's how I want to write it. So I'm just going to do it and see what happens.
That's the best way to do it. Is if it feels right to you with your story, then just go for it. And whatever anybody says, like, either you like it or you don't when you read it.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I think back to things like soap operas. Like, there is a drastic cliffhanger at the end of every episode. You do know that the next episode is tomorrow, so you don't have to wait long, but they've built a 30-year-long career on dun dun dun.
Yeah.
So people who hate cliffhangers, like, I feel like it's the ultimate tension. So
yeah. And honestly, okay, fine. For a first novel, that can be kind of tricky. And in terms of, like, if it makes sense, it makes sense. Honestly, I'm just of that opinion. I get it to a point where people might get kind of upset about cliffhangers in first books. But if you're in the middle of a trilogy or the middle of a series, come on, people.
You have to expect it as a reader. Like, I don't want everything to be wrapped up. I want there to be threads that I can speculate on and look forward to. Like, that's why I watch a season of TV.
Yeah.
Because
actually,
I
it's
want the
funny
long form.
Chris just said the same thing in the comments. I don't consider Empire a cliffhanger because the story being told on that film is complete, but it left loose threads to follow up on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that is actually, I'm going to flat out say, I think that was my biggest mistake in my first book. It is complete. You can walk away from that book and it's like a movie. It's not like a TV show. So I actually have on my agenda for the next week is to write a follow-up epilogue. It's only going to be, 250 words, but the big bad at the end of the book gets defeated. And you're like, oh, everyone's rainbow and sunshines. Why should I read the next book? Well, hold on, the big bad isn't completely gone. I left no hints to that. And so I'm going to take the cheap and easy and slide in an extra epilogue just from the big bad's perspective. I forget we can actually do this.
Whoa.
See, and that's where people, like, they got pissed about, not pissed necessarily. I had a couple people that got pissed, but most were like, oh, it's a cliffhanger, but it's still pretty good for my first book. And I was like, it's not a cliffhanger. Like, there is a complete story. Yeah, the villain gets away because it's a trilogy.
Yeah.
So I feel like the term cliffhanger is thrown around so much, and it is like 90% of the things that are called cliffhangers really aren't cliffhangers.
Well, and one of the reasons why I labeled my series the Night Quartet is I want people to know that even after the first book being released, there was a definitive end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So the series I'm writing right now, I'm actually a little bit nervous about because originally I was going to call it a saga because I imagine that there's going to be 3-book story arc. And then in a year, I want to come back and write a follow-up story arc. But I don't want people to think like, oh, this is unfinished, because I have been burned by so many authors where you're like, oh, can't wait for the oh, wah-wah.
Oh, I hate it when a series is just dropped.
Yeah.
There was a part that I followed in the indie world, and I'm like, really? Oh no! Like, you were doing so well. Why did you give up?
Well, and that's the same thing for TV shows for me. Like, I don't like watching. Everyone's like, you need to go watch this new show. Is it over? Well, no. Does it have a second season? Well, it might. Then no. Like,
yeah.
I hate getting, especially when it's like a Battlestar Galactica was a good example. 2 seasons is basically a contained story, and then the next 2 seasons should have been a contained story, but there's almost a feel that there should have been one more season, and you kind of got slapped by the last few episodes, and you're like, okay, well, wah wah.
That's the saddest feeling as a viewer.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
oh.
it really is.
Oh.
We could probably have an entire hours-long live stream about TV seasons that have ended, and you're like, oh, you just ruined all 7 seasons in one episode. Congratulations.
So I think we are going to shoot for 12:35 for the first sprint.
Okay.
So we got about 12 minutes. So
I was wondering. Oh, sorry. I did not sleep last night, so I am like really, really tired.
Yeah. Chris, you hit that one on the head right there.
Yeah.
I loved the concept of the show. I was sold on the first episode. I was ready to be in on it, but I stopped watching it in the first couple seasons, and then I was like, I'm going to wait till the series is over. And then when I heard how it ended, I just decided I had no desire to follow through with this.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Heroes was the same way.
Honestly. Oh, Heroes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That poor show. I loved that show. I bought the novels that they did, the stupid spin-off novels. I bought the graphic novels. I was all in. And then when that stupid writer's strike happened and they were like, well, we were going to go with season 3 being about a giant like disease that just breaks out of a lab, but we can't do that now. I was like, no. And they just threw out characters that they built up because they just didn't want to bring them back or whatever. The poor little siblings that were really cool. Oh my goodness, no. That show got to me so bad.
Yeah, you and everybody else was like, what the hell?
This wasn't X-Men at all. This was not good.
And the first season was so tension-riddled with I was all in. I still remember going to the movies, and there's just that big Heroes with the crescent moon symbol.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't know what it is. I need it. And I have never been more infatuated with a show than Heroes, because me, and I don't think any show has done it to this, where there was the novel tie-in, the artwork had meaning, the graphic novel played into it. Mm-hmm. There was the spin-off web series, and if you didn't have one or the other, you might miss just a subtle reference, but I needed to know it all. And then season 2 happened.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore, really. It's really sad, but I mean, I guess it takes a lot of coordination, but Star Trek used to do that all the time, where it was like, you're waiting for another season, here's 3 books. And you're like, yeah, I will buy those 3 books. Like, I want more of your official stuff. But that's why now we just have fan fiction, because they just won't give us the expandedness that we crave.
Well, and there's some of the shows I feel like that I loved got sabotaged by networks too. So it was like Eureka was like that for me. Eureka was totally sabotaged by networks. Warehouse 13. I won't even acknowledge the last season of that show. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
So I love that. So I'm gonna be completely honest. Heroes was such a big deal to me. It was the X-Men that I never got on the big screen. And when I started retooling what I wanted to do with my superhero universe, so as of right now, I have one series. I'm about to release the second. I have multiple short story tie-ins, which are all typical author things. Mm-hmm. And then if you go to my website for it, there's an ongoing serial that happens 200 years in the future, which, spoiler alert, in case any of my readers are reading, we're about to find out that one of the main characters is actually the descendant of someone from series 1.
Ooh.
And there's, like, in my books, the superheroes are slowly becoming worshipped like gods, but it ends. Like, you don't know what happens. Whereas in 200 years in the future, they are an established religion, and you get to see how that plays out in the future. And all of this is because of Heroes. Like, I started building a potential RPG into this so that, you know, it's a Bible in case I ever want to have other authors come on. But, you know, some people just want more all the time. So the serial lets them have, you know, those snippets. And if they've been paying attention, it gives hints to the books that are coming up, which is super hard to write.
Yeah.
Is probably
retcon everything.
It's probably one of the main reasons why I haven't pulled the trigger on a serial. I've wanted to. I've really given it some serious thought because I actually like writing short form fiction quite a bit. I didn't used to, but I do like it now. It's a good writing exercise, I think. But I don't know. I think I need to launch one of the, because I have 4 series total planned for this universe. So I think I need to launch at least one more of those before I dig into any kind of serial. Plus, they're all set in the past, so I'm not really sure, like, what would I even do?
Well, your serial could be now.
Present. Yeah, it could be present day. I've tossed that around, but I'm not sure exactly where I want to take all of this. So I need to figure that out first.
Or if you're not sure where it's going, go even further into the past. You could write a Victorian steampunky.
Yeah, I could do that. Or I could just I have an old woman character who's the original costumed vigilante in my world. So and the prequel novella is one of her stories. So I could just do a serial with her. I thought about that too.
And the great thing about a serial is you don't realize it, but you're writing, you know, 1,000 words here, 1,000 words there. Well, at the end of a year, if you're doing 1,000 words every week, that's 50,000 words. That's almost a novel. And if you're writing it, you know, with an end product in mind, swipe it, box it up.
Yeah.
There's your next novel.
Yeah.
It's like collected in one place for the first time.
Exactly. I love that. I love that marketing trick. You're like, no one's ever had this all together before.
Chris brings up a really good point, and I really like this idea of let's be honest, every one of us when we get to the last novel in a series are like, oh shit, there's a plot hole, or there's a thread I wove that I forgot about, and
I don't know where this is gonna go now.
But a serial could be a fun way of, you know, almost writing fan fiction of your own universe.
And that's what you've done with your serial. I've read some of your serials, and it feels like that. Only
And-
more polished. Nothing against fanfic writers. I love you all. Please don't burn me on the stake. But you have more time, I think, to just kind of polish it up. But it does read a lot like fan fiction, which I think I don't know. I find it very appealing because of that.
Well, and I'm trying to, again, the heroes thing. I'm not even gonna lie. I bid so much on one of the paintings from the show. I think my credit card maxed out at like $7,000, and I think I bid like up to $6,500 for one of the paintings.
Holy crap, dude!
It wound up going for like $50,000.
Oh my god!
But for a slim moment, I had it.
Yeah.
But I loved the fact that even the artwork got involved. So I always try on my serial is there's always an image that somehow relates, which gets a little bit difficult in future dystopia. But deposit photo account, like I abuse that all over the place. And it's even to the point where my artist who does my cover art for the first series is a character in the book, and he's a historian. So when I show the cover artwork, it's from the perspective of the artist who was documenting these things happening.
That's some deep work, man.
And I would love to say that it's paying off and I'm, rolling in the dough from it, but
it will, though. The thing about it is, I think a lot of authors lose sight of the long game. We hear so many stories of authors that they published their first book and they like made $1,000 in 2 months, but that is rare. We don't hear enough stories about the authors that focused on the long game and took 3 or 4 years to build up this fan base, to build up their art and their books and their world, and then found success. And the longer I do this, the more my gut screams at me that it is a long, long game, and to not give up after a month or two just because you're not seeing what the big dollar signs.
And the serial was built to be a trilogy. Like they're kind of going on a quest from Chicago to Troy, New York. There's one book. The Activities of Troy is going to be one book. And then there's another book where they get to Boston. And I'm so used to writing these condensed plot lines that the serial has given me the ability to write over the course of months, which is something I've never done before. So it's a little bit of an exercise. And at the same time, by next year, poof, trilogy. I hope.
Yeah.
So I think my clock is a minute ahead of yours. So we're going at 35 after the hour, correct?
Yep, we got 1 minute to go.
Okay.
And I will put up a banner for it. Chris, I hope you're writing with us, by the way.
Yeah. No guilt or anything. I'm just kidding. Tons of
Make
guilt.
those words happen.
So much guilt.
So much guilt. I get that from my kids. I have to pass some of it on. Like I have to purge some of it. It has to go somewhere.
Yep.
At some point, what we'll have to do is find a brave soul who will let us live. Oop, not what I wanted to do. Oop, wrong screen. Somebody will have to put up their live writing on the spot.
That's ugly, man. I mean, seriously.
I might try
ugly.
it, but not on my poor fourth book where I'm struggling.
Yeah,
Like,
right now
I'm like, no, I'm doing well.
right now my book is all sorts of feels, and if people read it, they'd be like, "Wow, you so much mush and no actual content. Great." All right, I'm gonna mute.
All right.
Be back in a bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Time.
Oh, that was ugly. I had a kid interrupt at the very beginning. I don't know which one it was, but I pissed him off with whoever it was.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's okay. We're a family of big feelings, so it doesn't take much.
I have to admit, I spent the first part of that finishing an assignment for my high school students that was probably due at 8 a.m. this morning.
Whoopsies.
I just
Well,
Words though.
how many words did everybody get?
356 for me.
Nice. Even with working on the assignment. Good for you.
I've got 8:30.
Jesus.
I know. I skipped ahead because I was like, oh, I was going to continue where I started this morning. Then I'm like, you know what? I don't know the details of how this poor person gets free. So I was like, I'm just going to jump to the part where they're free and be like, they're free. I'll figure it out.
I got 836.
Nice.
Oh, Trish for the win.
Yeah, which is incredible. One thing I did starting the last book that I wrote, the first and second drafts, I don't worry about descriptions so much. I get the basic description of a place or a building down, and I save filling in the details for later, because for me, that and fight scenes are really where I get stuck. I'm like, what do I want this place to look like, and what is in there? And it just stops me up so bad. So I give like the general idea, and then in revisions, I go back and I start filling in all the gaps. And that has made a world of difference for me. Just recognizing the parts where I really have to slow down and think and not worrying about it when I'm just getting words down really helps me.
What year does your book take place?
This one, let me see if I have that down. Well, it's right after Fahrenheit's Ghost. So the sequel is still summer 1963, but it's late summer, like August, September 1963.
Franklin, what year are you writing in?
Mine's present, well, mostly present day.
Okay.
So not, you know.
I'm at 1944, maybe. I have to go back and revise. Edward Hopper, who did the Nighthawks painting, if I can, there we go.
Nice.
Is a character in the book, and I have to go back and adjust things so it lines up correctly. And World War II is happening, so it's a massive plot point that I barely talk about. So definitely need more history.
I kind of stressed a little about history in mine, because 63 is I mean, the 60s are a very obviously very tumultuous time in America. And so people are like, oh, are you going to have the Vietnam War? Are you going to have the Kennedy assassination? And I'm like, I don't know. It's alt Earth. There's no New York. There's Metro City. There's not Seattle. It's Jet City. So I can do whatever I want with it. I leave out what I want to leave out, and I incorporate in what I need for the story. That's kind of how I'm tackling it from a historical perspective. And I'm glad I have an alternate Earth. Otherwise, I would just be drowning in historical research and like completely wigging myself out at the moment.
Yeah, there's so much.
I do enough to give it a place, but then I just kind of rely some on common knowledge. But as of JFK doesn't die in my universe, and that's where my timelines diverge greatly. So I know way too much about JFK's like foreign policies because it impacts the world.
That's good. Good for you. I don't know. I think I might, if I write into the 70s, which I might do, I might bring in the Vietnam War. I actually do have a series planned for the 80s that I'm really super excited about, like Russian spy Cold War stuff. I'm like, yeah,
So
just want to do that.
one of my favorite parts of Watchmen is the opening. Everybody else can hate that movie. It's one of my favorite superhero movies, hands down. But the opening scene where it's just the montage of the divergence of history, where the one of the newspapers that you see is Bruce Wayne's parents are still alive and doing a charity. And that's the only connection that Watchmen had to DC at the time. But then, you have Dr. Manhattan, who's just stomping through Vietnam. And like, I really love how, okay, this is an existing historical fact, but now we have superheroes. Watch how it really play out.
Yeah. I kind of want the challenge of exploring that with certain things. I'm going to have to go because it's 10 o'clock my time, and that means time for remote learning for the girls, and I need to help set all that up.
Oh boy.
Thank you guys for the socialization and the word sprinting. Have good writing. I'll see you guys later.
Coolness. Good luck.
Bye. Thanks.
So, Chris, I have a question for you. You're saying that you have firsthand experience from U.S. Army Spec Ops, which amazing. When you're reading a book, how detailed do the fight scenes have to be for you to enjoy them, versus like how much detail versus how much vagueness do you personally prefer in your fight sequences? Because I think that is definitely something that some authors skirt around and some authors like jump head on into, making sure that you're not punching with two left fists.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a victim of that.
For fight scenes in fantasy, I loved reading, and I still like his stuff when he does it, but R.A. Salvatore does really good like sword fighting scenes usually. He like watches them in his head as he's writing, so it's like, oh, I'm just describing what I would want to see in an action movie, and I'm like, that's craziness.
So super weird little fact, he lives literally like 3 miles from where I live. And he talks about playing softball all the time and with like his family league, and I was like, oh, I just want to go by and see the field. And he was playing softball with his family out on the field, and I was like, is it weird to stop and watch, or is this like creepy fan status? Like, where's the line?
Oh boy. Like, I got to listen to him talk once when Borders was around, and it was like the coolest, like down to earth. It was like, yeah, I'll answer any questions you want, because it was such a small crowd, so everyone's like, oh my gosh, tell me all about what. It's like, yeah, we read it so detailed.
Last year we had the New England Speculative Writers had a conference in Portland, Maine, and it went great. And this year we were gonna have it, despite plague. And then I was like, I really want a big name person. And so like Mal Cooper was gonna be a speaker, and Jill was gonna be a speaker, and Kevin McLaughlin, and Tammy LeBrecq. And so we had all these great people, and I was like, let me just reach out. So he doesn't have an actual email that he responds to, so I just messaged him on Facebook, and he messaged me back. And he's like, oh, I would love to do it, but I live in California during the cold season, so I'll be back for summer. And I was like, maybe we should move the entire conference just for him.
Oh boy. Yeah, his stuff. I don't know how he kept track of everything, because he has so many books that he's done. And it's all shared universe with other authors, where I'm like, you also have to keep track of what they're doing, and they have to keep track of what you're doing.
I wonder if at this point, if R.A. Salvatore is the Bible and everyone works around him, because
Maybe.
in the Forgotten Realms, I mean, other than Ed Greenwood for a while, all the others faded away, and it was just Salvatore.
Yeah.
Did you read his Demon War saga?
I have read the first one, and they were just like not too long ago. I feel like a year or so or more, maybe. But my timeline is just so bad in real life now. But he was able to put them up as ebooks finally. So I was like, oh good, I don't have to hunt down like old paperbacks that are falling apart. So that's how I started reading them. But I read some of his stuff in that world way back, but I didn't read his like initial like trilogy.
I think it's called the Demon War saga, and then the Transcendence trilogy. But the Demon War saga was the first time that you're like, main character, you're so much. Wait, you're dead.
Yep.
This story was never about him, and he was just an introduction. And Jill Saponi is still by far one of my favorite characters of all time. That woman, just awesome.
Crazy.
Guilty of putting in too much detail. I am constantly worried about not having enough, because I see a lot of authors who like to do fight choreographing where, they break out the action figures and, this arm goes here and this goes here. And I'm just thinking, just say they punched. Did he get hit?
Well, I did read a craft book where they did talk about writing action, and they said the more detail you add, the reader is more likely to read it as slow motion than the fast motion. So I try to go by that, so that if I'm putting in a lot of detail, then it's like slowing down everything. But if you're quick with it and you only do the bullet points, then it reads as like a really fast like scene.
That's actually a really good point. I definitely have, because of a telepath in my story, some of the fighting does actually happen in very slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times I have a character who's, capable of doing things like Neo from the Matrix. So just speed it up. Let's go faster.
Yep.
Wow, I really need to think about that. I think I have some fight scenes that might go too fast when I want them slow.
It's a good like it, because it's so broad that it's easy to notice, because you're looking at your page, and if there's giant paragraphs of stuff, you're like, okay, this stuff is slowed down.
Oh, Chris doesn't even use full sentences. You're that person who does the ellipses.
Oh.
Yeah, or the what is the? Oh God,
I'm a huge fan of that, where it's like something happens, dash, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh, the M dash.
M dash.
I read a book not too long ago where I think an entire fight scene, there was never a complete sentence. Everything was an M dash. And visually on the page, because I'm a designer first, like it was so jarring. But when I read it and then thought about it, I was like, he goes to punch, but he gets blocked. So it was always like every fight action was being interrupted by a counterpoint. And I was like, okay, that was visually rough to read, but mentally, that was pretty epic writing.
Yep.
M dash slut. I feel like that should be the name of our author, like indie band right there.
Oh, jeez. Copyright the t-shirts.
It's going to be a dash. That's it. All right. I think if the bot's actually working anymore, I think it might be Springtime? Maybe. There we go.
All righty.
All right, be back in a bit. So many windows to navigate here.
Everything's pushed into the corners.
I have Google Chrome open with StreamYard. I have Safari open with my YouTube videos. I have the Discord. I really need to shut some stuff off. I got 623 words.
It's not bad.
I am finding the serial is a lot like they're currently running from an unknown thing towards kind of an unknown thing, which yes, super descriptive. But tension is always kind of high, so like I feel as anxious writing it as the characters are supposed to, so it seems to happen faster.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time they just stand there and they're completely confused as to what's happening.
It's like, what are we seeing? That's when I do internal stuff where I have my poor main character, whose name is Fallout. He's usually like, it looks like this. Perhaps this is how it works. No, I'm wrong. That's not how it works. Oh.
My main character is a historian, and in this world, all data storage got wiped out. And so what her job was at the beginning of the story was she took old newspaper articles and retyped them, basically. And they're essentially rebuilding the internet. And she goes to school to be a historian, and she's basically just constantly finding out everything she learned in history classes were wrong. And so she's constantly being like, well, if this happened, then is everything I know wrong? Like, she spends a little bit too much time contemplating her life. Meanwhile, they're running from a big bad. So
yep. There's always going to be a big bad that my thing is I usually end up having like the friends of the characters be put into a tough spot where it's like, okay, that's their motivation. Save your friends because it's simple enough. Or I'm like, I feel like that's good enough motivation for me to get out of like a tough spot.
What is the age group that you kind of target for your writing?
I would say like the low end would be like middle schoolers.
Okay.
So nothing too like well, it'd be like from any middle school up. I didn't dumb it down though, so I just didn't put like crazy profanity.
Yeah, I just so someone just rang my doorbell. Something wrong if they think I'm answering the door. I try and keep swears out just because readers have commented that it's jarring. So I strategically place them where, you know, they should actually go. But I would say my age group, who I thought I was writing for, was probably youngish adult, like maybe teenager, because it's kind of dystopian, but there's a little element of hope involved. But what I found is my average reader is like 55 years and up.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I look at Goodreads, that's where I notice like, oh, people have added it to my shelf. It's like, yeah, we're all sort of like suckers for like school age characters because it's like we all know.
My students would recommend me books all over the place, and I don't necessarily think that they're lighter reads, but they're maybe less epic. I mean, very emotionally epic, but not like I need to read 30 books series.
Mhm.
One of my students is actually the one who got me to read Brandon Sanderson's first, was it Steelheart?
Yeah.
And the book was good. I enjoyed it. The writing was super tight. I was a little bit shocked that by the end of it, I really did feel that the age group for it was probably middle school to high school. It wasn't really. I expected it to be older with the premise for some reason.
Mhm.
Well,
I read something once where it was like the average person who reads for entertainment reads at like a like early high school level, like sentence wise or whatever. So like the people that read the classics are like they know they're reading like the highest form of literature, but then people that read just like as much as they can for enjoyment, it's like the more complex it becomes, the more difficult it is to like power through. I noticed that on my own.
Do you use anything like Grammarly or ProWriting Aid when you're doing your edits?
I haven't. I have like a couple friends that are like voracious readers that I have like check it.
So one of the things that ProWriting Aid, I don't know if Grammarly does it, ProWriting Aid will actually tell you it calls it like the sticky index, and it's broken up into like 4 psychological schools or something, and it's basically kind of showing you what the guesstimate reading level is based on your sentence structure and word choice.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was really shocked that even what I think to be my most complex and profound and dark and horrific writing still read at like a 9th grade level, which I guess makes sense since a lot of them are, reading Shakespeare.
Yeah. Interesting.
I never really, I guess I didn't give it too much stock when I'm actually writing.
I know that a lot of the commercial fiction I read is like it's like churned out, not in like a bad way, but it's definitely churned out. It's like they're not going for like crazy. They're just hoping to entertain, which is what I do seek out sometimes like deeper stuff, but a lot of the times it's like, okay, like this stuff isn't really going to be remembered. It's going to be like considered like modern day pulp. Like I read a lot of weird Western books where it's like, yeah, gunfights and like the characters are all grizzled.
After reading like 30 of them, you could reread them and they would feel like the same thing, just slightly different. Here's a different tragic backstory and the damsel's name is slightly different.
Yeah, there's a lot of recycled plot. Like, and I've been reading this one. Well, technically it's an author, but it's like his estate continued on his brand after he passed away. So there's all these like ghostwriters writing, and some of the plots you're like, yeah, I read that like 2 years ago. It's different names and different location, but it's same plot. Crazy group of thugs comes in, terrorizes the specific establishment at the town. Word gets back somehow through the main character's son who traveled there, and then they all go there and they all fight. And you're like, yep. And it doesn't mean it's not enjoyable, but you're like, okay, this.
I know indie authors get a lot of slack for this whole, well, you're putting out a product.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not trying for a literary award. I'm trying to be a good storyteller and tell an entertaining story.
Mm-hmm.
So, I watch, I'm trying to think of like the CW.
Oh yes.
They are great storytellers, but really the Flash has the same exact plot line every season since the first season. And yet here are me still watching it.
Yep.
Sometimes I think there's a little bit of comfort in that too. Like I kind of know what's coming. I know how characters will react. I know that the scapegoat option. And look, Barry yet again has a speech about not going into the past, change anything, and yet here we are again.
Oh boy.
Or Supernatural. I watched like the first 12 seasons of it, but oh no, we've escalated to a new big bad. At the end, one of the brothers is going to have to die, but the other one's going to sacrifice himself to protect the other. He's going to die. First episode next season, he'll come back. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I almost felt like I was watching fanfic at that point.
So my favorite superhero show that it will always be like my all-time favorite was Smallville. And they got into the rut where it was like every season there's going to be somebody who's friends with the main characters. You find out later they're an undercover villain from somewhere, from Krypton, and then they reveal it, and then all the characters are shocked that this has happened, but none of them remember last season when the same thing happened. And their professor was secretly a Kryptonian from the ship. And it's like, oh, how many times is Lex going to betray them? And then they all forgive him at the start of the next season. But I'm still suckered in, even though.
And for me, the thing that kept me going is I read an interview during the first season of Smallville where they said when Clark Kent can fly, when we end the series. And I guess that was kind of their barometer for how they wanted to pace it.
Mm-hmm.
But every season, he gained some new ability.
Yep. That happened for quite a while.
Black Kryptonite or purple Kryptonite or just, man, the planet is really colorful.
It was kind of funny that because they were twisting a lot of stuff that was well known, and they were trying to make it fresh by being like, oh, not everything exists here, but this character that you thought you knew, they're introduced a totally different way, and you didn't know it was them. And I was like, that was cool. I like that stuff.
What I really liked about it was when you knew Luthor was not coming back for the final season, and yet he was still the villain.
Yep. That poor guy. He couldn't
job of not having a character still be a bad guy.
And they're still continuing on the story with comics, which is hilarious. It's like,
oh really?
Yeah, they had like I haven't read all of them, but they had like a season. It's called season 11, and it's basically they're just ongoing. Like they introduced Batman, and like Lex doesn't remember anything about his time in Smallville because he had his memory wiped. So it's kind of like, oh, fresh start.
When the CW did Flashpoint Crisis on Infinite Earths, I was so happy that they brought back everybody except for Smallville Green Arrow and Smallville Aquaman. I really wanted them to show up.
Yeah.
Because for almost 2 seasons, it kind of became the Green Arrow show and Clark Kent.
Yep.
Everyone needs a rich friend, is what I've learned.
You just need a rich friend who has lots of technology.
All right, 20 minutes.
Okay.
I hate that when you make a sprint, it doesn't automatically put your word count in and make you join it.
Oh.
So this time I have 1,468 words. Woo!
Like, oh boy.
It sounds so great, but not really. I wonder if I can still. Oh, I guess not.
I think you can adjust it for like the specific session. Because I did it once where I accidentally added like 21,000 words and I was like, oh no, that's not correct.
If only it was so good. Yeah, let's fix that. The bot's running really slow today.
Laggy.
Okay. Let's see, how is everyone doing for today? Oh, you are in number 1 today.
Craziness.
3,000 words. That's impressive.
Not too shabby. That's like 2 chapters.
I'm at 1468. So that my goal originally for this year was to have at the end of the year my daily average be 750 words. And then all of this disaster happened, and all of a sudden my daily average went from, it started at like 500 and now it's up to like 1250. So I feel as long as I hit the 12 mark so it doesn't go down, I'm going to call it a success. But I really need to start doing more 3,000 days because I want this book done.
Yeah. I find that skipping ahead like a chapter-ish is helpful for me to get a high word count because I have something to work forward to, and then like the end of the day is like filling in the gap.
Okay.
So if you know you're going to have like the end of something, then just write that and just pick a starting point, and then you know where you got to get to.
So whenever I get to the end of my book, like that final confrontation, I always write the ending of it and then fill in like the 2 chapters leading up to it. So I know where the story is going.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, word sprints, they're the way to go. I would have scoffed at them, but they worked during Nano. And 1,600 words was so difficult. Then the apocalypse hit, and I was like, oh, just kind of lazily doing it. And then all of a sudden, I got into word sprints with Mal and Jill, and I went from having those 750 word days to, oh man, not quite 3,000.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was don't get me wrong, like the live video thing is great, but it does slow you down a little because you're, chit-chatting. But I noticed that in 2 hours, I could get done with sprints what was taking me 6 hours to write before. And I don't think it's been at a loss for quality. If anything, I think it's more think on your feet.
Yeah, it's like on the outside, you would be afraid like, oh, I'm just going and I'm not really thinking. But that's like the good part of it for me, is that it forces my creative side to be like, okay, just go with it. Don't analyze it as you're going, like, because we all consume entertainment. So you kind of have to, when you do a sprint, you have to just trust that your brain has consumed enough storytelling that it's going to just do it for you.
And I think like I try to always end a sprint like a paragraph into a scene or into a new chapter. So I'm never feeling like I'm starting from a blank page. It, for some reason, I think psychologically that first empty page, you're like, oh, I have to put words on it. Whereas as long as I left myself kind of a note on where to go with it, seems to help. I'm not quite sure if it really does.
Yeah, it's nice to pick like the middle of a scene or like a third of the way into a scene that you plan to write and just being like, I'm starting here and then just going with it.
And I think that almost lets your creative brain ramp up because you knew where you were going before. So now you can ease your way into new material by refreshing. And then all of a sudden you're like, crap, I didn't know where I was going next. Well, now I'm in my groove, so I'll just throw down whatever on a page. Yeah, Chris, I agree. Cleaning up is so much easier. I wish I was a writer that wrote clean. I am not. My editor gets like my fourth draft and still looks at me like, did you ever go to high school? I don't know. Did you go to school in Maine?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So up in the good old Brownville Junction are
that just is such a great name.
It is exactly descriptive. Like it's trains and railroad tracks everywhere. I still remember we didn't do grammar in writing until my senior year, and it was only the last quarter of my senior year, and it was done using worksheets. So how you properly use a comma, meh, that's what my editor's for.
I remember I had teachers that were like, why are you using so many commas? But then when you actually start writing fiction, it's like, yeah, you do need to sort of give your reader a pausing point, or if you're starting a new idea, you need to have it. Because I've listened to, it was a hilarious a couple YouTube videos where they picked out fan fiction and were reading it out loud, and they would read the run-on sentence without taking a breath. And they were like, yeah, this is why you need commas. And ever since I listened to that, I was like, yeah, you do need the commas.
I find dictate to be extremely complicated because your character walks into a bar, comma, and then they do this, comma, and then they do this. And by the end, you're like, 90% of what I just said was commas, because you feel the need to put them in everywhere when you're speaking. Mm-hmm. But in truth, if you actually read your page, wow, you do use an uncanny amount of pauses of these sentences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a semicolon.
I never know where to use them, so I'm so afraid to even try to use them.
So I remember on my last book, there was a spot where I was pretty certain semicolon went in, and my editor circled it and said, why have I seen this before?
Because I like it.
I think I used it correctly, and then come to find out it was actually, I think I needed a colon instead of a semicolon. So it was worth a try. All right, so 2 hours and some change, I wrap up, and then I put out to a bunch of people for getting some authors in. So eventually we're going to get Jeff Haskell and Derek Asher coming in. I'm trying to find more non-American people, but it seems that East Coasters, it's easy. So
Yeah, and our time is way different from everyone else's. Everyone's like, "Oh, I'm just getting up," and you're like, "This is the beginning of the afternoon for me."
well, Trish, she's in Washington, so
Yeah,
she hopped at like 9 in the morning. I'm like 9 in the morning. I'm not even a functional human being.
no,
I try to get Lana to join us, and come to find out she's in Australia somewhere, and she's like, that's kind of like the middle of the night for me.
oh
So
boy,
but
we forgive you.
we started doing a little bit of planning today, so this is going to be kind of exciting, and I haven't actually even broadcasted it, so first time anyone gets to hear it. We are going to be having a mini con coming up in May, and we're going to put out a request for superhero authors to participate, and we're going to be doing 5 nights of superhero panels.
Ooh,
So we are ironing out the Chris, I'm 100% with you. Anything before 10 a.m. is just bonus time. No work, no nothing. It's basically I stare at a blank television wondering, why am I up at this point? My day job, I have to normally get up at 5:30.
it's like
Why
why
am
am I
I up at
time lapse video of somebody building a Lego set at like 8:30 in the morning to be like, please, just let my brain activate.
Oh God. So yeah, Trish and I are ironing out what the panels are going to be. We're going to feature a panel of romance authors, a panel of origin, powers, and character development. We're ironing it out, and we're going to put it out, and we are literally going to slap together a convention in a week, because what else do we have to do with our time?
Well, yeah.
And it's a reason for us to get together and be geeky with each other. So
Yeah, since we have no physical like there's no game conventions, there's no actual Comic-Con this year. It's like, oh man.
and even if no one shows up for this, it's just exciting to see another human face.
Yeah, it's true.
I actually have to go and do a conference call with my students, which I was kind of dreading, but I'm kind of excited to see teenagers again. Never thought this day would come.
Oh boy, for my work's Zoom videos, I was so sick of just looking at my own self. So I did the whole like replace the background. I made a little Lego like diorama of like my office space normally. And I made 2 characters of my coworkers behind my shoulders, being like, you guys, you're here, you're in the room with me. And they were like, you must be really going cabin fever. And I was like, yeah.
What do you do for a day job?
I work for it's a video production place.
Okay.
So I do like, they're not filming anything right now because we can't go anywhere. But whatever they do film, I would be like taking it in, processing it, make sure it goes out to get edited. Then it comes back and we double check everything.
Oh, nice. Of all my graphic design knowledge and all the classes I've taken one video course, and I learned just because you're good at everything else does not mean you have any knowledge in video.
It is so technical. Some of it is so technical because it's not as easy as just put the camera up, record it. It's all good.
The podcast we do has taken 2 months for us to adjust sound issues.
Mm-hmm.
And just, man, people who do it, like, bravo. It's
yeah, and they make it look really easy, and I know it's not. Even with my background, I'm like, and it's so much effort and so much work that's like, do I really want to do this for fun, or like
Oh, Chris,
That
that's
I've
awesome.
talked about doing a podcast, a video podcast on like nerdiness, and then like pre-recording and then editing. I'm like, oh no, the amount of editing it will take to make that one little 10-minute video look beautiful, like the ones I watch.
Like the ones that Marvel puts out have like the cool backgrounds and all the like the fast-paced motion graphics, and I'm just like, oh, it's beautiful, but you probably have an entire studio of
Yeah, and they
people.
have a staff. If you're doing it by yourself, it's a lot. So
It's
that's
a
why
full-time
people.
job for a 1-hour video.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people get away with doing just recording their voice, and then they have like just some graphics that go on the screen because it's so much easier.
We do video. The video is kind of secondary. We never expect anyone to actually watch it because podcasts are the way to go. But just getting like frame overlays and then having her Skype in so I can take the video, process it on the computer so it outputs the sound correctly. I've learned so much useless information just to make this look semi-good.
Yep.
And then StreamYard comes along and 2 clicks of a button and you're like, poof, there you are.
Oh boy.
So yeah, I'll be putting out more information as soon as we iron out the details for the conference, but it looks like it's going to be a good time.
Cool. It sounds fun.
So yeah, best see you sign up for a panel.
Whoa.
Pressure is on.
I'm gonna make sure, make myself look presentable. In case anybody tunes in.
This is about as presentable as it gets. Should probably shave at some point. All right. I will talk to you either later or tomorrow or something.
Cool. We made some good dents in our projects.
Have a good night, day, time.
You as well.
Take care.
Bye.